So this workshop we're going to be looking at this afternoon is entitled "What is your research vision?" As Peter's kindly identified, my name is Jim Baxter. We're going through a slight reorganisation at the moment. So Peter introduced me as an academic development consultant at the beginning of the month. My job title changed to research and development consultant. Don't worry about the detail. We will get into more of that later as we go along. And I'm based at the University of Leeds, which is in the United Kingdom. Just before we get too far into the webinar, let's me just deal with one or two items of housekeeping. I've planned a schedule such that we'll take a short 5-10 minute break about halfway through. Depending on how things go, I will decide when precisely we will do that. The webinar has been recorded, so you'll be able to access that in the future. It's really important for this webinar that you have pen and paper to hand or some means of writing things down. You're going to be doing things. You're going to be doing some writing as we work through the content. So please be ready for that. Your microphones have been switched off, and that will help us make sure things run smoothly. So how do we want you to engage? Please engage actively with the things that I've got in this workshop today. There's a couple of forms I'm going to ask you to complete, and as I say, I'm going to get you to do some writing. Please also take notes as we go along. Please engage with the chat function. That's the place for you to ask questions, and I'm looking for my colleagues to prompt me when a question has been asked. Otherwise, I will end up in full flow and miss them. So please do. And when you ask a question, please prefix it with a Q so we know it's a question. I've talked about the interactive elements in the workshop, so there'll be a form, a couple of forms to complete. And at the end, it'd be really helpful if you complete a feedback form that we will let you know about. This will help us shape and decide what to cover in future sessions. Okay, so just briefly, a little bit about me. I've been a research and development consultant, academic development consultant for the last 23 years, working in our organisational development unit at the University of Leeds. Before that, I spent 4 years as a lecturer in mechanical engineering, and before that, I was a postdoc in mechanical engineering, and indeed before that, I was a PGR in mechanical engineering. Briefly who I am, but we'll come back to this later, and the way I've presented it in this way will become apparent. So I've structured the workshop today against these 6 elements. Why do we need a vision? And that's probably going to take us like 10-15 minutes at least to get through before I get to what we're trying to achieve with the workshop. I'll then talk to you about what a vision is, give you some examples, get you to develop your start point for your own vision, and then think about how that relates to your research strategy. Okay, so the first thing I would like you to do is to think about and identify, write down, how do you distribute your research time between applying for research funding, managing, administering, doing research. This includes data collection, running experiments, being in the lab, out in the field collecting data, as well as completing expense forms, approving expense claims, buying equipment. How much time you spend, what proportion of your time you spend publishing research, so writing research outputs, writing impact case studies maybe. And then the fourth area is other research related activity, and make a note of what that is. I'm very interested to know what that is. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do it. Once those 5 minutes are up, I'm going to give you a form to complete where I want you to tell me what percentage you spend on each of those 4 activities. So I'm going to start the timer on the slide, and I'll come back to you in 5 minutes. Thank you very much for your responses. Please do keep them coming in, and please do answer the question on the second part of the form. I'll have a look at that in a moment. There's very much looks as though there's a very clear pattern emerging here, is that you spend the vast majority of your time actually doing the research, and a reasonably small proportion of the time doing the application, the publishing, and the other things. So it's very much about the research activity, the doing and publishing, where the bulk of the time gets spent. Okay, let's so thank you. Do keep the responses coming in, because the pattern seems to be reasonably clear. I'm going to jump over to the second page and see what the word cloud's telling me, which are the other things you're doing. Oh, so working with the research community, that's interesting. Translating the research, interesting. Managing people, okay. Communications, okay. Really, really interesting. Right. Let me so thank you all very much for engaging with that. I had absolutely no idea what the likely pattern was going to be, but that helps me moving forward. So let me move on. So what I'm going to talk to you now is a view of an academic research process. Is based on the work of Deming, who looked at the Japanese industry after the Second World War, and Kolb, who looks at experiential learning, and they have a cycle that they use, which I'm going to replicate here when it comes to research. So in broadly, what I'm saying here is that you plan research activity. Result of planning research activity, you apply for research grants. Some of those applications will result in funding that enables you to actually do some research. You do the research, and that do box is the thing that very much was highlighted on the poll that you on the form that you've just completed. That's where you're spending the vast majority of your research time. There was very little. The plan relates to the applying for research funding. There was a small amount of time spent on applying for research funding. So that's the doing. The doing results in you creating data, knowledge in some form or other, and I'm talking in very, very broad terms there. The study review part of the cycle is related to producing outputs, publications, conference attendance, maybe impact case studies, and that box, that the study review part very much relates to publishing research and delivering research impact. For those of you who are at the postdoc stage in your career, then very much the doing and the publishing is probably where you spend the bulk of your time. Those of you who are looking to move into academic careers, though, are probably looking to be more proactive about getting the resources in to do the research. And the bit in the cycle that I haven't quite got to yet, and this is why this workshop's important, is this act, strategize phase. And I don't think there was, I didn't particularly pick up anything in the word cloud that was created that related to this. This act strategize is about having a research strategy. And that research strategy is the thing that gives you the context within which you write your research grant applications. And during my experience as an academic, one of the things that I found useful and indeed was very much encouraged to do was to find an appropriate balance between each of those activities, making sure I was spending sufficient time writing research grant applications, sufficient time creating publications, as well as doing the research, as well, and in particular, to spend some time on thinking about the big picture, what my research strategy was. So, Abhijay Peters, this is the one text I found where somebody's actually talked about applying for research funding, not just as a one-off exercise, but as an endeavor that is a continuous activity. And what Peters talks about is that you need the money to keep the project running, but people who get the research funding are consistently take a different and more measurably better approach to getting those resources in. And the people who are successful talk more about the relationships, being proactive, and the partnerships that they've got than they do about applications. Broadly, what she's saying is if you develop the relationships, are proactive and develop partnerships, then the applications flow from that. Another perspective is from Kenway et al., who talks about seeking and winning research funding is part of a continuous process. It's about continually you developing your research thinking, your strategy, and your collaborations. It's not just a one-off grab for money. It is actually part the applying for funding is part of a much bigger picture of activity. And the question is, how do you resource your research is what I'm talking about in amongst this. And what those two examples indicate is that it's the building of partnerships in your network, and that network being with both collaborators and funders, broadly anybody you work with. That's where what results in the research resources. And to do all of that, and this is why this workshop for me is so important, is to get people on board, you need a vision. The vision being delivered by your strategy. It's that vision that gets people bought into you and your research, what you can deliver in terms of your research, what can you bring to the collaborator table. It's about having that conversation in the lift at a conference where somebody who is a big player in the field gets in the lift and they say to you, so what's all your research about? It's about having that elevator pitch where you can deliver in 30 seconds a clear, succinct summary of what your research is all about and why they should be interested in you. So I introduced myself to start with by indicating how much time I had spent in roles. What I didn't do was tell you about what those roles were about delivering, and this is what I've done on this slide. So maybe the better way for me to have introduced myself would have been to say, I've spent a reasonable amount of time developing research leaders. When I was an academic, the focus of my research was about developing better products through scientific engineering design. And as a postdoc, I was working on broadening the reach of computer-aided engineering beyond geometry. And I hope that gives you a sense of that's what I was doing. That was what I was about. That's why people should be interested in what I do, rather than the fact that I've just spent a lot of time doing all of those things. And on the next slide, I've unpacked developing research leaders a little bit more for you. So the work I do is about helping people to identify what their responsibilities as a research leader are. So once you've got that money, you've got to hire people, you've got to manage people, you've got to manage the project, you've got to deal with a lot of the administrative activity, as well as doing some of the research. So it's important that people are aware of their responsibilities. I work quite hard at helping people understand the processes around doing research, help people to navigate through the vagaries of administrative and bureaucratic structures, so they can spend their time focusing on the big research thinking rather than trying to make the machine work at a detailed level. Some of what I do is about providing people with time for reflection and planning their research. And today, for me, is very much about providing you with some time to reflect on your research and what your vision for your future research is. And then the last point here is through micro interactions is the work I do is not necessarily about a workshop or a program and a series of workshops, but it might be, this micro interaction might be a question I ask you or a small suggestion I make, and it's that thing that makes the big difference. So that's what I'm about at the moment, and that's why I think you should be here in this workshop, because I can help you do some of that. And to that end, the outcomes for the workshop are three. I want you to be able to better able to identify the elements of a vision. I want you to be able to succinctly describe your vision for your research, or certainly made a start point at it, and then to identify elements of your strategy for delivering your research vision. So what we've got now is one or two slides on defining what a research vision is. Bear with me, and we'll hopefully I will give you what I think is a more tractable view of it for you to work with today. So vision consists of a notion of a core ideology and an envisioned future. Core ideology this is not something you set but discover. It's about your core values. It's about some fundamental reason for being, a core purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing? A vision future. The Collins and Prayers talk about big, hairy, audacious goals, and the crucial thing here is that it's about a period of time. There's not what a 3-year project is going to deliver. It's what you're going to do over the next, what you're going to be delivering in 10, 20, 30 years time. And the key question when you're I think thinking about your vision is, if I'm sitting here in 20 years time, what would I have liked to have achieved? So don't think about next year, don't think about 5 years, do think 20 years time. What is it you're going to spend your research career doing? And be ambitious. Okay, I talked about core values. I'm not going to get into core values. I've given you a couple of resources there to go and explain, for you to explore your values. I'd encourage you, if you haven't explored your values before, to go and have a think about that. Use those resources and see where that takes you. So this is the thing that I think is maybe most helpful for the rest of the workshop, is based on those definitions, how I've described a vision. There are, I think, these 6 things that I think are key to a vision. 1 is it needs to be clear. 2, concise, short. It's focused on the future. It's not about where you've come from, but where you want to go. It's compelling. I can't say but yes to it. It needs to inspire people. People want to say, yes, I want to buy some of that. I want to be involved with it. And it needs to be ambitious. And that's partly where this 20+ years comes in. Be ambitious. So you make a note of this: clear, concise, future focused, compelling, inspiring, ambitious. So here are 3 examples of some visions. 3M, the people who make post-it notes, sticky tape, their vision is about to solve unsolved problems. At the University of Leeds, we have an Institute of Medical and Biomedical Engineering. They talk about 50 years after 50, and what the Institute of Medical and Biological Engineering do is does research into artificial heart valves, artificial knee joints, artificial hip joints. And what they're looking to do is to provide medical devices that will help people live until they're 100 years old, to enable their body that's potentially wearing out in their 50s to be able to repair that body and live for another 50 years. So that's the medical and biological engineering example. And then at Leeds, and this relates to some of what Peter said at the beginning about what the Worldwide University Network is about, is one of the institutes we've got at Leeds is Water at Leeds. And Water at Leeds are about an interdisciplinary approach to tackling major water issues. Right. So what do I think about these visions? So first of all, they're reasonably concise. They're short. I think for me, they are compelling in nature. I want to live for another 50 years after 50. I want the world to be able to have a clean water supply. Compelling, and they're future focused. They're about looking into the future, what's going to happen next. So for me, these examples are quite good at replicating what I identified earlier. In fact, I'm going to jump back. They're clear, they're concise, they're future focused, compelling. For me, they're inspiring and ambitious. Right. Okay. So the next activity, I've got another form for you. So the scenario here is you are sitting on an awarding panel for some research funding, and you need to choose one of 3 research projects to fund. And what I've done here is presented you with 3 vision statements for the research projects, and these are the things that you need to choose from on this awarding panel. And this replicates the sort of things that happen in awarding panels all the time. They have to make decisions on which project gets funded on very quickly on not very much information. So I'll be interested to see what your views on those three visions are. Again, with this form, I had absolutely no idea what the outcome was likely to be. They're all based on real pieces of or real research activities that I'm aware of, and it's looking like very clearly the raising societal awareness one has come out on top. I'm surprised that's come out as high as it has, but it has done. With about half of you voting for it, about a third of you have voted for the better climate change legislation, and then 16% of you have voted for the statistical analysis. I do wonder whether, and when I was putting these together, I did have a debate, is the one on the right that's got 16%, the better statistical analysis to improve patient lives. If that had been the other way round, if that had been improving patients' lives through statistical analysis, I did wonder whether that would actually cause it to climb higher up the list of votes, and that's because of putting the benefit at the beginning of the statement before you indicate how you've achieved it. Both of the other two are indicating what the benefit is before telling you how it's achieved. So that bottom line up front, I think, is crucially important. And the thing I want you to think about is when you're putting your research grant applications in, when you're applying for those resources for research, is to encourage you to put really clearly what your bottom line is for your research up front and center, the opening sentence, such that the person reading it is drawn in and goes into the reading of the proposal with the mindset is, I want to fund this. I have read too many grant applications where it takes me 2 pages to actually find what the research is about. So thank you very much for engaging in that. Okay. So I've been trying to hunt around and find some other examples to show you. I think the thing that has emerged whilst I've been doing that is that it can very much depend upon the discipline you're in, what you're interested in. So my suggestion is go and look for some for yourself. The good ones should stand out, will stand out. Move on quickly through them and make notes of those that are compelling. Use the ones that you find compelling as models. The reason for moving on quickly is that if you're debating whether it's a good one or not, it probably isn't, and you need to move on. The thing that I have come across since I put the slides together is something I'm going to put in the chat for you. So at the University of Auckland, there is this web page that lists a number of institutes they've got, and each of the institutes describes a mission, and buried within those missions are visions. So if you want some good examples of future-based statements about what the future will look like, that will be one place I would go and have a look for some good examples. So I am running slightly ahead of where I thought I might. So we'll wait a little bit before we take a break, and we'll get into this activity. So a good start point for a vision, I think, is this notion of a 6-word story. So the example of a 6-word story is the one that's listed at the second bullet points. Child's shoes for sale, never worn. There's a lot buried in that. There's a lot that's said with those 6 words. And I want you to aim for that sort of clarity when it comes to you describing your own research work. And what I've endeavoured to do on the third bullet there is to give you the 6-word story associated with the research I was involved with when I was an academic, which is better products through scientific engineering design. I'm just going to leave that slide up for a moment or two. What I'm going to get you to do is to spend a little bit of time now having a go at writing your own 6-word story. Okay, so I shall leave that there for a moment to do, just to let it sink in. And then we'll put the next slide up. So what I would like you all to do is to draft a 6-word story of your own, for your own research. This is just a start point. My experience of doing this on a number of occasions is you have a go at it and you return to it a week later, you return to it a month later, you return to it a year later, and it develops and it evolves and gets more refined. So bear in mind, it's just a start point. It's not about being perfect. And remember, it's about being ambitious, compelling. It should draw people in. And one of the ways that I found people learn when doing this activity is to see other people's examples. So I'm hoping you're all willing to actually put your 6-word story when you've written it into chat when I ask and share it. And then everybody gets to see some examples, and that will help inspire everybody who's here today. And I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do that, if that's okay. Just for those that are posting into chat. And yes, 7 words. I'll definitely take more than 6 words. I'm trying to get you to be focused. So thank you for bearing with me. And I think the thing you will find as well is that all of these will over time be refined by thinking of really getting to the bottom of why you want to do what you do. And I think the key in is giving it a flavour of what is it that you're doing that makes the difference. And I hope you're all reading them as I am and seeking to learn from what other people are doing. Thank you all very much. That is absolutely superb. What we shall do now is take a break until the hour. We'll take a 9-minute break, come back on the hour, and at that point, I'll start to talk a little bit about how our vision relates to strategy. So I look forward to seeing you again in 8 minutes' time. And thought they were absolutely excellent. There are too many to pick out, but I'm going to pick out one which particularly struck me, and that was purposely designed environment breeds sustainability. That one stood out to me as particularly good, because it talks about both the intent and what will result from that intent. Okay, so a little bit about vision and strategy before we get into the thinking about how to develop your strategies. So the vision is about providing that sense of direction. Where do you want to be in 20 years' time? That's what the vision's about. And the strategy, and in some cases the mission, provides a way of moving in that direction, is delivering on that overall goal. Mintzberg, when he talks about strategy, talks about it as it's a way of integrating all the elements within an organization, a piece of work, a group of people. So it brings everything together into this notion of a cohesive whole. And I was talking to some researchers earlier today who were talking about a number of research projects they were running, And as a result of thinking more strategically about it, they identified there was one particular project they were running that didn't fit with the rest of them, and that because they identified that enabled them to say, well, I'm going to exit from doing that particular research, that type of research, because then that gives me time to focus more on doing the cohesive whole, working with the overall strategy, working with those projects that fits within that cohesive whole. So it can be a really powerful way of identifying what it is you need to focus your time on. The Mintzberg goes on to talk about marshalling the resources that you've got. If you've got a real clear vision, then it means that you can identify what's unique about what you do. Where's for researchers, that's about delivering that original contribution to knowledge, delivering that data and insight that will enable you to publish in the best quality journals. And the other thing is that you get from thinking about strategy is thinking about how do you address those areas where you've maybe got shortcomings. How do you ready yourself to deal with anticipated changes in the environment and moves by others? So there's somebody at the University of Leeds, Kath Noakes, who was able, because of her research work, to join government advisory committees on how to clean air in hospitals, and that became to the forefront of our thinking during the COVID pandemic. So it's and until that COVID pandemic arrived, nobody knew what was going to be needed, and Kath was in a really great position to help us learn from her research about how to manage infection borne through the air. The big challenge we're dealing with at the moment, and in fact this is reflected in some of your 6-word stories, is generative AI. What impact is that having on the world and on society? And there'll be people who are well placed to respond to that because they've got their research, they've got a clear vision of where their research is going, and they've marshaled their resources to work on that particular research area. Okay, there's a degree of assumption on my part at this point is that you will have come across these notions of SWOT and PESTLE. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what they're about, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to engage with them as we go forward. So bear with me, please, particularly if you've come across them before, because I might repeat things you were already aware of. So the couple of tools that you can use when you're developing your strategy. One is SWOT, and SWOT refers to strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal to the organization in the context of your own personal research strategy. It's what are your individual strengths and weaknesses as a person. Opportunities and threats are in essence outside the organization, and the PESTLE acronym, and there are variations of the PESTLE acronym, are about helping you identify what the opportunities and threats are. So are they political opportunities, economic opportunities, societal opportunities, technological opportunities, etc., and the same around threats. And what I'm going to get you to do in a minute or two is to actually have a go at doing a SWOT analysis on your own research. So that's SWOT and PESTLE. And then what I've done is done this exercise for my own area of research. So I talked about developing better products through scientific engineering design. Okay, and I'm giving you that's the SWOT. The slide is telling you what I've just said, right? So the first one is a strength example. So the strength that I had was that I had expertise in the application of computers in engineering, to aid engineering design, and that very much came from my postdoc work, from my PhD. So the key element to the strategy within that triggers is making sure that I continue to publish excellent research outputs, continue to do the research and write about it. A weakness that existed with my research was that engineering design, although I'm was in a department that's very much about engineering analysis, scientific study, engineering design is inherently a social process. It involves people being creative, deciding on what the best options are from a creative process to meet a set of requirements. So the element in the strategy that I was starting to build was how building relationships with social scientists, including anthropologists. So actually going and finding other people at the University of Leeds, in this case, who would help me to understand how I could investigate that social process. An opportunity example. So when I was doing this work, I was doing collaborating with the likes of Unilever on fast-moving consumer goods, British Aerospace Systems, BAE Systems, who were developing aircraft designs, were thinking about how they use technology to develop aircraft designs, and others. So the opportunity was that I've got a network of interested groups and companies in terms of the research work that I was doing, and that very much relates to the technological element in the pestle analysis. And the key thing in amongst that for my strategy was making sure that I maintained regular contact with my stakeholders, is about continuing to maintain that network of people. And the threat example is that from my perception, people who did the analytical research, who were running experiments would set up a test rig, run a number of experiments, create some data, and then analyze that data. That analytical type of research much more directly links to cost benefit. If you can reduce if you can increase the efficiency of an internal combustion engine by 1%, then that's really attractive in terms of saving energy. And so the cost benefit analysis, the cost case for the research becomes a lot more straightforward to pitch. And in terms of the pestle analysis, that relates to political and economic perspectives. And the strategy element from my perspective is how was I going to be dealing with that threat? And that was to work with the partners, remember the network that I identified earlier, to identify pathways to research impact. Whilst I wasn't the business case expert, the people that I was working with were the business case experts. So I needed to work with them to establish how we made a case for doing this research and indicating the imperative for doing it from a commercial perspective. Okay, so that is the example of the threat. And so what I'd like you to do as part of this workshop now is to go and start to do your own SWOT. We're going to do this in 2 phases, assuming we don't run out of time. So the first phase is for you to go and do the strengths and weaknesses part of the SWOT. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do this. When you're thinking about the strengths and weaknesses, try to think broadly about what your strengths and weaknesses are. So it might be about your knowledge, it might be about the experience you've got, it might be about the skills that you've got, something else that I haven't included in that list. And think of a number of domains. So you may be a very skilled chemist, but you may have very limited experience of managing a project. You may be come from a business environment where you're very strong at generating new business, but you don't necessarily know that familiar with the various different methodologies associated with doing qualitative research. So do think across all those domains about your strengths and weaknesses. So I've just given you one example of one strength and one weakness. And what I'd like you to do is to have a go at identifying a number of strengths and a number of weaknesses, and then start to think about, okay, so what might I do about each of those? So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do that. So we'll come back at about 20 past the hour. For popping those in chat. So there's, I think, 2 key messages that are emerging from me having read these. One is that you each have different strengths, and I think this helps to illustrate the value of collaborating and working with others and developing that network, because where you may have a weakness, somebody else might have a strength, and finding out the best people to collaborate with is really important. I think the second thing is that there's varying levels of detail in what you've written, and I think you will find it helpful to be specific. The more specific you can be about your expertise, your strength, the better. So if you are an expert in qualitative research, what sort of qualitative research are you an expert in? What areas are you expert at applying it in? And the more specific you can be, the better able you will be able to, particularly the weaknesses, identify what you need to do about it. Okay, so that was the strengths and weaknesses, and you can probably guess what's coming next. Not that. So the next thing is we're going to go through exactly the same exercise again, and this time you're going to get 10 minutes to think about the opportunities for your research and the threats to your research. And this time, work through the checklist of political, economical, societal, technological, legal, and environmental. And you may well find, certainly I found that when I was thinking about mine, that a lot of it revolved around the technological area. If you are working in water and water provision, then that might very much relate to environmental. Actually implementing some of the changes that you want to make as a result of your research might mean that you focus more on political, economical, and societal aspects of this. So I'll set the timer going again, and we'll give you 10 minutes to think about what the opportunities and threats are for your research. Coming in, one of the things so there are a couple of things to mention. First of all, what can happen with strengths and weaknesses, and indeed opportunities and threats. If you've got a strength that can be a mirror of that strength, that can be a weakness, and vice versa. A weakness can be a mirror of a strength. So don't necessarily worry if you're debating about is it a strength or a weakness. Just put it down in one of the boxes and think about, okay, so whatever it is, what do I need to do to improve the situation? And the same can be true of opportunities and threats. What might be an opportunity in one context might be a threat in another context. And it's about you identifying that and then thinking about what do I do to make a difference. I think that the thing that message I'm taking from what I'm seeing of the opportunities in some of the other chat messages is that you often don't have an immediate way of mitigating against a threat or taking advantage of an opportunity. And it's about if there's a big action that you need to take to mitigate against a threat, then be prepared to actually identify that big action, but break it down into chunks. The crucial thing for me is two crucial things. One, identifying what the big threat is and what the overall action is. The second thing is what's the first step in terms of building towards how you mitigate against that threat. And often can be about going back to what I was saying at the beginning about networks, about partnerships, about collaborations, focusing on those. Often the solution is to go and talk to the person that might be able to help you. The person that might be able to help you might just be able to signpost you onto somebody else who can signpost you onto somebody else. So be prepared to take that simple next step and draw upon your network to help identify solutions and answers. Okay, thank you for posting your opportunities in the chat. Again, as with the strengths and weaknesses, the more specific you can be, the more helpful it will be to you, because it will enable you to identify more specific action to help leverage the opportunity or mitigate against the threat. Okay, I'm going to pause at this point. I haven't noticed any questions coming up in chat. If you do have any questions for me, please do pop them into chat now. Broadly, I'm going to draw things to an end, draw things to a close here. The importance of having a vision is that it will help you be clear about what your research is about. It will help you make decisions about what you do and don't do. It will help you be able to say no to things and yes to things. Yes to things that fit with the vision, no to things which fall outside the vision. Or you can say yes to things that fall outside the vision, but are being aware that they're not within that vision. Having a clear vision will help get people interested in your work, will help you develop your networks. It'll help you attract collaborators and ultimately win the funding. So that getting the funding, getting the resources is about developing the network, developing the ideas that will result in the funding. And often those successful funding applications, certainly in the UK context, is about addressing problems and pulling a consortium together to address a problem, rather than thinking, I've got an interesting idea here that's of interest to me, and not really aligning it with one of the societal challenges. And having a vision will provide a start point for your research strategy. And what you've done over the last 20 minutes or so is start to think about, what are the things I need in my strategy to help leverage the strengths and opportunities I've got, and help me deal with the threats and weaknesses that I have. Okay. Yared has asked a really important question about how do you make sure that your vision remains current. So I think that there are two important things here. One is, when you're thinking about what your 20-year vision is, what your goal is into the future, is to characterize your vision in terms that should transcend changes in government, should transcend what may happen over the next 3 or 4, 5, 10 years. It's about trying to identify something that will look 20 years, 30 years into the future. And that can be a real challenge. I recognize that. The other I think important thing is that you make sure that every once in a while, I would say at least every year, revisit your vision. Is it still current? Is it still relevant? Do I need to update it? Has something changed in the world that needs that we need to change our vision? And as part of what you've done today, as part of what reviewing that vision is, not only is it's important that you go through the process of doing it, because if you going through the process of doing it will cause you to think about, okay, what am I really about here? It will cause you to question yourself. Another thing to do is to actually try it out on other people, try it out on colleagues, people you know in the community, and see whether it means something to them, see whether it engages them, and actually learn from what the feedback other people give you, and be really, really open-minded about that feedback. Whilst it might be clearly obvious to you what your vision is about, if it's not landing with other people, then you need to do something about it. Okay, so we've got some more questions that have come in. Okay, Innocent's question: how can we effectively manage unhealthy competition and discourse within research groups? I think that this comes down to probably negotiation approaches. It's finding where the common ground is. If you're within a research group, find where you have common ground. Find where you have common interests. Find where you're be clear about what where there's overlap in the research you do and what the differences are, because certainly in terms of collaborating with other people, those differences may well be the things that cause you to work effectively together. I recognize it becomes challenging when you're working in very similar areas and you're competing for the same pot of money. Certainly in the UK, I would suggest that actually the larger collaborative groupings of people are more successful than those people that are in direct competition with each other. So it's, and you might, another approach you might choose to adopt is, if you're in the same group and you're applying for the same funding, is think about how as a group you're going to develop a strategy. Think about what the plan is for applying for research funding, and make sure that you don't both submit funding applications to the same round of funding, is that you make sure you're out of step with each other in terms of those funding applications. Yeah, how do you manage the competition? I think the best way to do that is to be upfront with each other. Okay, so there's another question that's come in. How do you advise implementing these strategies and working towards our vision? Actually doing these, we talked about, succeeding in light of defunding of humanities initiatives. Okay. So if this is really tough, is when there's reduction in funding. So part of the thing to do is to think about, okay, within this strategy, what can, so in terms of, and I'm making huge assumptions here that you're a salaried employee at an institution. If you are actually paid to do research work, is actually being thinking about what can I do with my own time and resources as an employee of an organization to move forward on this research agenda. What are the little things I can do that enable me to develop a compelling argument to engage with other people? So some of the work that I'm aware of that happened a while ago in Leeds is some of the people that were involved in the school is called Performance and Cultural Industries. They do a lot of things associated with theatre, with live performance. And they, I believe, were involved in a project looking at how the city centre was designed and thinking about how people move and engage with the city centre. And that was much more of a local development, architecture, design type activity than it was about theatre studies. So if you're working in an area of arts and humanities that's maybe been unfunded, is think about the opportunities to how do you partner with people doing research who do get funded. I know somebody at Leeds who recently has done some writing around the use of poetry to describe weather, and they're working very much with people who are engaged in research around climate change. So I think that there are, it's about being imaginative and creative about how you engage with people. And then there's probably a really harsh decision in amongst all of this is deciding whether to what extent do you need to pivot your research to areas where there is funding. I think you've got to be honest with yourself about what is realistic in terms of how you can succeed. And I go back to something I said about something else. Often the best thing to do is think about what the first next step might be. Okay, so I think those are the questions that have come in. Oh no, I've got another question. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. So there's a question about more arguing for the benefit of more theoretical research. This is one I really struggle with. So there's a philosopher at Leeds who I know who works at what I describe as the philosophy end of philosophy. So what's the philosophy behind philosophy? And I really struggle with being able to understand why that has societal benefit and how it generates funding. So that particular person's got an uphill challenge, but is successful at it. So it's if it is at the very theoretical end of the spectrum, then it's finding those funding opportunities and people who work at the very theoretical end of the spectrum, and working with those to understand what is needed, where the funding will come from. Another example, having talked about a philosopher who works at the philosophical end of philosophy, I know another philosopher who looks at thinking behind how organizations are designed and has come up with a very philosophical approach, a structure for deconstructing organizational designs. So in that instance, it's about finding the link between your very theoretical world and how it can benefit society, or find the people who know how to take your theoretical work and use that for the benefit of society. And one of the things that I suspect Jed will have talked about at the last one of these webinars is thinking through what are the impacts of your research, and it's starting to get those initial small impacts identified that then will allow you to draw in other people to think about how you might impact their research work. Okay, so thank you for that question. So thank you very much for the questions. That's the summary slide. Right. So that's what we've done. Then I've got at least 2 more slides to go. I've missed one. Action plan. So I've skipped over the action plan, I think. So having given you a summary, talk through some of the questions. What's crucially important now is what you do next. So what I want you to do is to spend 3 minutes writing down what you're going to do next. I'm going to give you 1 or 2 thoughts and ideas here before you get into this. First one is think about what you're going to do this week, what are you going to do this month, what you're going to do this year. So have a short, medium, and long-term plan for what you might do next. One of the simple things you might do is take away the notes you've made on your 6-word stories, on your SWOT analysis, and write that up, work that up, have another go at it. Another thing you might do is to take what you've done around 6-word stories, SWOT analysis, try it out on other people. You could go and have a look at the value resources, think about what your values are and see to what extent that impacts what your vision might be. The key thing here is if your vision doesn't sit well with what your underlying values are, then maybe you need to adjust it because it's really difficult to deliver on something you don't necessarily fundamentally believe in. The other thing to do is that I've talked about SWOT and PESTLE and give you a very, very thin overview at the top of it. Is you could go and do some research work, look on the internet. There's a whole load of resources that will be turned up if you search the internet for how to do SWOT and PESTLE analyses. Feel free to go and have a look at those, and there'll be resources around developing visions as well. The key thing for me is you getting clarity around where your research is going to take you 20 years hence. So I shall give you 3 minutes to think about an action plan. What are you going to do this week? What are you going to do this month? What are you going to do this year as a result of being at this webinar today? Is to ask yourself, why do I do this research? Why is it important to me? And what it may be about is actually adjusting, refining your vision to ensure that it aligns with what motivates you, what interests you, and really dig into it. Ask yourself. There's the notion of asking yourself why 5 times. Why do I do this? So why do I do that? So why do I do that? So why do I do that? Which can be really helpful in getting to the bottom of it. And that might be really helpful in refocusing your vision. The other, Pimnara has asked about how do you match your vision to the funders. So I think there's a couple of things going on here. One is that certainly in the UK, often funding calls are associated with immediate challenges, interests to the funding body. What they're looking for is an answer within typical funded projects about 3 years. What they're looking for an answer that can be delivered in 2 to 5 years. And what I'm trying to get you to do with your visions is to think beyond that, is to think about this is the thing in the future, 20 years in the future, that I want to be able to deliver that really excites me. And I think the trick is to have that really far off vision, that big, hairy, audacious goal, and then to adjust how you pitch that to meet a particular funder's requirements, meet a particular funder's call. And it may well be that your vision is just part of the puzzle that the funder is looking to solve. And this is where it comes back to the networks and the collaborations. It's how do you stitch together your vision with other people's vision to come up with what the funding call is all about. So it's having that imagination, creativity to actually adjust what you're offering to meet the funder's requirements. In sales speak, it's about selling the benefits rather than the features. Your vision is very much about, this is the really long-term benefit that I want to deliver, and to enable me to do that, here are some of the features. And what you're doing in terms of applying for funding, I think, is about saying, I've got these features that will deliver a slightly different benefit for this organization. I'm not right. Okay, I'm getting into sales and marketing speak. Let's not go there. Right, we're nearly on the hour. So we've done the action plan. I think we've done the next slide is a summary. Next workshop. So the thing I want to trail is Ruth Wyndon's running a workshop on how to create a compelling LinkedIn profile and raise your visibility. Crucial to you raising that social presence is your vision. So if you arrive at Ruth's workshop with a refined vision, that will give you a great start point to helping develop a LinkedIn profile that will attract people to you and your research. There are a couple more slides. I'm not going to go through those. One is the next slide is a set of references. You're more than welcome to go and look at those, and just a blank slide at the end. That's me done. My name's Jim Baxter. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.